Let's turn our attention to events at the British Grand Prix. I'm delighted to say Chris Medland, Formula One broadcaster and journalist, is with us now. Chris, good morning to you. How are you?
Good morning. I'm very well, thanks. How are you?
I saw in one of the papers today the halo was described as the controversial or much despised halo. For those of us who are coming to Formula One relatively new, and it turns out there's thousands and thousands and thousands of people tuning into Formula One in increasing numbers, the crowd is swelling. Why was the halo so controversial in the first place, and why were people so against it?
So 2017 was the last season that we didn't have the halo. So basically the driver was slightly less protected. You could see them more. You could see them inside the cockpit. Formula One's always been an open cockpit racing series with open wheels, so the wheels aren't covered either. And it was seen at the time as going against the DNA of F1. I mean, let's be honest, it's quite an ugly contraption to have this kind of unit in front of the driver and over the top of them, like almost a cage around them. And it for some people took away a bit of the aspect and as they would call it, the DNA of F1, and removed the ability to see the driver so closely, for the driver to have that experience of being completely open, and the way Formula One had always been. But it didn't take long for certain incidents to happen where the halo had really saved a driver's life, or certainly saved them from serious injury, that those people that were dead against it started to sort of change their minds. And I think this weekend especially, there's probably two incidents where we can really thank it for making sure that drivers weren't either killed or seriously injured. So it's been one of those things where you just needed a bit of time for the examples to roll out for them people to kind of change their minds.
The footage is so spectacular at the weekend, where the sparks are flying from the halo, and afterwards the driver is speaking. It's such a remarkable thing. Does this mean that we'll see more changes in Formula One, or is this kind of the end of it's now? Is it now safe enough that they don't need to make too many more changes like this?
No, it'll never be safe enough, in the sense that Formula One will always keep trying to improve. But I don't think it'd be around the halo that they actually make changes. I think that was a big step to protect the driver's head. Obviously, they wear helmets, but as you could see with that accident at the weekend, if the halo wasn't there, the helmet is against the ground at that speed. But that's because the roll hoop failed. So there's a roll hoop at the top of the car that should keep the car a certain distance above the ground if it's upside down, or if something lands on top of it, to protect the driver's head as well. And that failed at that speed, with the heat and with the impact. It seems that the cars are so heavy now that basically the test will need to be beefed up for next year to make sure that the roll hoops will sustain that kind of force. So that's the sort of thing that will improve moving forward. Essentially, every time you get another case where there's excessive loads or bigger loads that something has to withstand, then everything gets beefed up to deal with it. It kind of in response. So the FIA, the governing body, will be analysing the accidents of the weekend and trying to work out, okay, what can we learn from here to make sure that the next time this happens, the cars are even more safe.
How are the drivers from the two incidents at the weekend?
So in a sense, I should probably mention three incidents, actually. So Guan Yu Zhou is fine. In fact, all of the drivers are fine, which is great to say. Guan Yu Zhou was the Alfa Romeo driver who was upside down, and then his car dug into the gravel trap, flipped over the tyre barrier, and landed hit the fence that stopped it getting into the grandstand, and dropped behind the barrier the wrong way. So he was stuck in the car for a long time, but was completely fine, which was incredible. And he came out to the pit wall to see his team and kind of make them all know he was okay. And the crowd was going crazy. And he asked his team members, oh, who just overtook who? Thinking Lewis Hamilton had passed someone, and the crowd was going wild for that. And they're like, no, that's for you, that you've just come out of that unscathed. The other one was Alex Albon, who had quite a big hit into the concrete barrier at turn one. And it was at the same time with a separate incident, and that gave him some back pain. So he was taken to a hospital in Coventry by air ambulance just to check him over, and it actually just took a long time. But he's fine. He's already sort of doing rehab work and should be okay to race this weekend in Austria. He was even cooking burgers on a barbecue by Sunday night. So it was just precautionary, those checks. And the other one was a guy called Roy Nissany, who races in Formula 2, who had another car basically T-bone him, but from an airborne position, launched off another curb. And without the halo, he would have been seriously injured or killed. I mean, it would have hit his helmet clean. So he's also fine, having been so close to much worse injuries. So yeah, really, in a sense, really lucky, but these are safety advances that F1 makes to protect against these incidents. So as scary as they were, it's a testament to that work.
The race itself, obviously, somewhat overshadowed a little bit in a aftermath because of those incidents, but it turns out it was an actually brilliant race as well.
Yeah, it was a classic. I mean, a lot of people have been talking about it being one of the best races they've seen. I think because of the racing we got. Silverstone is a high-speed circuit. It's perfect for these new cars that are high downforce, but generated in different ways. So drivers can follow more closely, but it's very, very high speed. And we had spells of racing where drivers were 3-4 wide. Towards the end, there was an amazing moment where Sergio Perez and Charles Leclerc were fighting in a second place at the final few corners. They both kind of run off the track because they're fighting so hard, and Lewis Hamilton passes them both on the inside, and the place erupted. Now, Hamilton lost that place 2 corners later because they can fight so closely, but there was some amazing racing going on. Carlos Sainz got his first win, which was very popular because he's been a popular driver for a while, but his spell at McLaren specifically, I think, really elevated him to another level, and everyone was pleased to see him finally get a win for Ferrari. It wasn't a good day for Max Verstappen because of car damage. He actually did really well to fight on and finish 7th, but I think the home fans that are largely Lewis Hamilton fans were quite pleased to see Verstappen have an off day or a tough day after he won the title last year. So they were very, very pleased to have Sainz in first, and then Sergio Perez recovered brilliantly to second after damage at the start, and Hamilton got on the podium in third. So there was a spell it looked like Hamilton could have won that race. Mercedes were much more competitive than usual, and if he'd have won it, if there are any roofs on some of the grandstands, they definitely would have come off. But yeah, third was still a good result for him.
The process by which Mercedes are trying to become competitive over the course of the season, is there anything they can do to accelerate that so the end of the season is more interesting from their perspective, or are we really looking at next year before that car is genuinely capable of producing a contender for a world title?
No, I think they're making good progress now, actually. There's certain upgrades they've brought that they've started to understand things. They might be a bit limited in their development this year, that they can't quite get onto the level of Red Bull and Ferrari at every circuit. But I think we'll see them closer to the top 2, sort of from the summer break onwards at most tracks, and at certain tracks that suit them. Circuits like Suzuka, which is very high speed in Japan and smooth is the thing they need, then they're going to be very, very competitive and in the fight for wins. So Austria is a bit TBC, which is coming up this weekend. But in 2 weeks, we then go to France, Paul Ricard, and that's a smooth circuit with some high speed corners where I think they'll be competitive again. So I think as the season goes on, we'll actually see a more competitive Mercedes, but they're probably too far back to really be a threat in the championship battle. They can just probably worry Red Bull and Ferrari more regularly for fights for race wins.
But the feeling will be that next year they will be properly competitive again?
You'd hope so, but at the same time, they're on the back foot from this year, and this is the start of a new era of car. The other 2 teams have kind of nailed their concepts a bit better. They've been more competitive this year, and they will upgrade their cars for next season too. So they will refine what they've already got. Now, in one sense, Mercedes has more scope for improvement, or they could go for a different concept if they feel like what they've gone for isn't going to get them to the front again. But they seem confident that if they can make it work, they've got a race-winning car in there. So I think it's higher probability that they have a stronger start to 2023 than they did this year, but there's no guarantees based on the fact that everyone will be doing the same sort of work to improve.
Yeah, of course, everybody else going to improve at the same time. What about Hamilton's future? Is there any chatter around about a potential retirement next year?
No, I think there was a bit from Sir Jackie Stewart saying that he thought that Lewis should kind of retire and go and pursue some of his other interests rather than sort of fade from competitiveness at the front. But Hamilton was not happy to hear that, and Jackie Stewart actually wanted to clarify that he kind of didn't mean right now. It's just at the moment that happens, and that's not happening yet. I mean, we saw Lewis at his best at times at the weekend at Silverstone. Some of the moves, some of the racing was sensational and so clean. It's the stuff that you really need to be so precise. There was a move with Charles Leclerc at the place where Hamilton and Verstappen collided last year, very controversially, where the 2 of them went inches wheel to wheel through the corner. Leclerc actually overtook Hamilton around the outside. One of the best moves I've seen in a long, long time. But the way they were both fighting, and Hamilton did come out on top in the end, was sensational to watch. And I don't think that Hamilton will be retiring anytime soon, partly because he loves that racing. He loves those moments, but he also loves the fact that he's seeing Mercedes just claw its way back towards the front. And if this year is not going to be a championship winning year, which it almost certainly isn't, then next year is more likely to be one if they can start on the right foot. So yeah, he'll be kind of thinking that this year is the year to work hard and try and put those foundations in place to try and get that 8th title in 2023.
We've spoken a good bit on the show, Chris, over the last 18 months really about the popularisation and the second coming of the sport. While obviously the hype around it is hugely important in dragging the new fans in and showing the soap opera, the most important thing is the quality of the racing being good and sustainably good. And it turns out that actually, while the sport has been accused of being hyper-conservative in the past, the changes that they've made to allow the type of racing that you've described at Silverstone at the weekend has been really beneficial. The product has been ready, I suppose, for the hype that has been coming alongside it.
Oh, absolutely. I was kind of surprised, but pleasantly surprised. Yesterday, I just played football here back home on a Monday night, and one of the guys that I play with went to his first Grand Prix at Silverstone. I didn't know he was there, and he was sat at a corner where there was some overtaking, not loads, but some. And he said it's the best sporting event he's ever been to. He said he went from kind of a casual F1 fan who followed it and watched races on TV a bit to now he wants to go to multiple races. He says the event, the atmosphere, everything's incredible, and the racing was brilliant. And he was supporting Hamilton, and he said every time he comes by it's like a goal being scored, like every 2 minutes, and he just said that atmosphere and excitement, you just can't escape it. So I think that's what's been really important, that anyone who does then invest a lot of money and put in a lot of effort to get to one of these races, because there's over 140,000 now on Sunday, you've got to deal with a big crowd and a lot of walking around and waiting around and traffic. You need a good show at the end of it, and that's exactly what they got. So you're right, Formula One has been working on multiple different fronts at kind of expanding its reach and its growth and its popularity, and it's done it through off-track ventures like Drive to Survive, or the way it's done on the TV series, or the way it's opened up social media. The drivers are more personable now. They're really letting their personalities show through, and they're very honest through social media and stuff like that mainly. But then they get into the cars, and we're getting good racing because F1 also invested in these rules and regulations and the research to try and make sure that the cars were still extremely quick. That's the main thing. You want them to be amazing technological creations that are rapid, but that you can race with them. And it's not hard to put the two together. So they've done a really, really good job, I think, this year of making a step towards that.
I am just really disappointed that Eddie Irvine isn't 15, 17, 19-year-old driver breaking through right now, because, I mean, you know, this would be his moment to shine with a desire for people to have a bit of personality. One last question for you. A YouTube commenter who's watching, Shifty Lads, regular contributor to the show, asks, can you ask, value for money, weather, country, what's the best Formula One race to go to in Europe?
In Europe, I'd probably say Budapest, the Hungarian Grand Prix. An amazing city that's not too expensive. The track's not too far away. The weather's normally great. The fans are great. You get a lot of Scandinavian fans coming down as well to there that like to have a good time. And the racing's been pretty good there in the last few years. It used to be actually a bad track for racing, but that's certainly improved as well. So, yeah, I think value for money, I'd probably go with Budapest.
All right, come for the F1 analysis, get some travel advice. Chris, great to have you with us this morning. Thanks a million. Cheers.
No worries. Thank you.